So this game has impressed me for like 2 years. It's been really consistent in bringing out quality gameplay with a quality dev, with a quality concept, and that is a game built by gamers, and it's just such a fantastic concept. It's The Witcher 3, by the way, maybe even the Witcher series. I didn't play the entirety of the Witcher series. I only played the third game, but just from what I'm seeing from the game right now, it's just CD Projekt Red has a fantastic future ahead of itself. So, The Witcher 3 has a great development team. It has CD Projekt Red behind it. In my last video, I was kind of talking about the negativity of having a publisher or developer that isn't really it doesn't have your back as a game developer, and this one has your back, so to speak. I remember in my first when I opened it up, the actual game case, it had a map in it. It had the actual soundtrack, which is fantastic, and it had like a couple of other things. It actually had like a compendium of like it's like a list of all of the characters in the game, and kind of like their backstory and stuff like that. So if you're unfamiliar with the game's characters, you'll be able to learn who they are, like Triss and Yennefer and Geralt. It also had a thank you letter, which I've never been thanked for buying a game from a developer, and just seeing all of this good stuff in the game was fantastic. Not even in the game, but in the actual box that the game came in, it was very positively reinforced that this was a game developer that actually cared about me as a gamer individually, and collectively it cared about us, and I like that a lot. The story is what was really impressive to me because it was very organic, it was very fluid, and this kind of goes with most of the game, including the DLC. It was very organic. You can influence so much and yet so little depending on what you want to do as a player. You can destroy empires or reinforce those empire roots. You can conquer lands, or not necessarily you as the player, but you can influence countries to conquer more land. You can influence kings and queens to kill their siblings, to gain power, to ensure that the threat of their siblings isn't present. You can do all of this amazing stuff, and you can do all of this political stuff, and yet you can do all of this personal. I don't want to say stuff. You can do all of these political relationships. You can also have these very personal relationships with Yennefer, Triss, and Ciri. Not the actual app or the actual like thing that's in your iPhone, but the girl that's in the Witcher 3. You have such a personal relationship with her, and depending on how you interact in certain situations will depend on the endings that you get. And I think there is like 64 different endings in the main game, and then it branches off when you buy the DLC, right? So the DLC stories, I think Hearts of Stone, out of the main game, Blood and Wine and obviously Hearts of Stone had the best story. Hearts of Stone, it was such a, I don't even know what the word is. It made me really think. I remember, because I just started classes this week, my psychology teacher, I think I read it in the actual psychology book, is that psychology, it's one of the sciences that really makes you think. It's like all the sciences obviously make you think, but it really makes you ponder and question, yourself and the actual question that's being posed. I remember in the introductory to that class, it was that, if you could take a pill that would make you happy, would you take that pill? The Witcher 3 is kind of like that. It's like, okay, you have Yennefer here as a love interest, and you have Triss. Triss is kind of like the one that you kind of like slapped away, and you really mistreated her to an extent because you didn't have your memory as Geralt. And Yennefer is like the one that you've always been with. She's the mother of your child, and Triss is kind of like series sister, and it's kind of like this positive and negative flow of all right, here's the cons of having Triss, here's the cons of having Yennefer, and you can go at it. And the same thing kind of goes with a lot of these other choices. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong. There's just this option and this option, and it gives you this gray type of area. And in Hearts of Stone, it's like this very gray area. I felt like in one part of the DLC that I was given this option of, and I won't spoil it for you because I want you to go out and support CD Projekt Red, and I want you to go out and play Hearts of Stone. But there was this one part in the actual game that made me think I lose. Like either way, there's no way of me winning, or there's no way of the character that I'm about to influence winning in this situation. I lose, they lose. It's only how badly do they lose is the question. And luckily, that's really like the only moment in the game that really makes you think, damn, we both lose in this situation. I feel like a terrible person. Something happens to this character, or something doesn't happen in this character. Either way, we both lose, right? So I think the Blood and Wine story wasn't as good as the Witcher 3, the main game, and the Heart of Stone. And I think that it's kind of because the developer, CD Projekt Red, they put in so much time and effort into the actual side quest missions and all of these other aspects, and trying to fill Toussaint up to that of the main game, that it just took so much time that they really couldn't flesh out the story. I thought that the story was very rushed, but it was still a very good story. It still had me thinking about some things. But I think the main game is better than the Heart. No, not the Heart of Stone. The Blood and Wine DLC, the story of the main game, and Heart of Stone is probably the best story, even though it's the shortest one, or it's one of the shortest ones, I would say. But don't take that as a negative thing, that Blood and Wine is a bad story, or it has a bad story. It's actually a pretty good one. It's just not up to par to the main game in Hearts of Stone. Like, it's better than, Blood and Wine is better than most of the stories that came out in full games last year and the year before and even this year. So it's just such a fantastic game, and the stories are really fantastic. And I haven't even really talked in depthly about the organicness of the story. Like, when you read a book, there is a plot that is set in motion, and there's really no way for you as the reader to really influence it. In the game, there's a hell of a bunch of ways to actually influence the story and make the story something that is exclusive to you. Like, it's interesting to see that happen, and to see that just be such a fundamental part in the game. It's not so much the main story is so organic, like you see that in some games, but it's consistent across the board. It's that side quest missions are very organic, and even these events that happen in the game, they're even very organic in the sense of how you can influence these characters. And some of these characters are just NPCs, just random NPCs, and you learn a little bit about them, and you're like, okay, I want to help him, or I want to hurt him. And it's just so rewarding to see you being able to influence these characters and not really have a bad or a good decision, just a decision that's yours, and really yours to make. So the next thing is the actual gameplay, and I think gameplay is one of the strongest elements in the game. I've never seen something so unique in a game. I've never seen something so positive and long-lasting as The Witcher 3's combat. So pretty much the combat, I prefer to play it on Death March. When I beat the game, I switched it to Death March, and it just made the game just come in full circle. But the gameplay is is like the other half of The Witcher 3. It's the organicness of the story then it's the gameplay, right? So the gameplay, I remember at level 1 when I was fighting off a bunch of ghouls that that I had, that the game just said, all right, you have the attack button, you have two attack buttons, you have square and you have triangle. Then you have circle, which is the dodge button, right? And then you have X, which is the dash button, right? And L2 counters, but it doesn't do the Batman Arkham style of, all right, you can counter like every single thing, because you're sometimes fighting 4 to 5 different enemies and you can't necessarily like counter all of them when you only have 2 arms and a sword, right? So you need to use the dodge button as well as the dash button to reposition yourself, so that way you won't die to these bountiful of enemies, because a pack of wolves will attack like a pack of wolves. A group of ghouls will attack like a group of ghouls. Humans are some of the hardest enemies because they will attack very strategically. The archer will be in back. You may have a guy with a shield out in front, and the more you back off, the more you fight, or the more you try and run away from these enemies that, or these groups of humans, I should say, the harder it is for you, because you have the archer just constantly firing arrows. Then you have the guy with the shield and the sledgehammer constantly trying to swing it at you, displace you, and it's just such a unique combat system that really isn't seen in a lot of video games. And I think one of the other points that's just very small but very important is that the world is your arena, right? And a lot of these games, there's really not a lot of space for you to fight. And in The Witcher 3, it's like you can fight on the side of the road, you can fight in a city, you can fight in a forest, you can fight anywhere at any time. And even though, yes, The Witcher Geralt does enter a combat stance and some of the controls are a little bit different, it's still the same area, it's still the same effect. You have the world to operate in, right? And you can use some of the trees as cover to make sure that you, if you're fighting off groups of enemies, sometimes the trees will kind of mess with the AI and they'll try and walk around it, or they'll try and walk through it and maybe get a little bit stuck. But it's so fantastic to see that you can use some obstacles in the actual world if you're smart enough and if you're good enough to be able to use the combat to your advantage. Plus, unfortunately, there are some glitches with the AI that's kind of just, it's impossible to fix. I was taking on this fort, so to speak, and there was like 30 to 40 guys in that fort, by the way, which is a lot. It took me a very long time to actually take this fort because of how many people there were in that fort, and I constantly reset the AI. I constantly moved outside of the fort's radius, then I moved back in. The AI would aggro on me or put aggression on me, then I would move back out, then I would move back in, and it was kind of like during that move in and out, I would constantly be using spells. I would be using Igni, I would be using Quen to try and heal myself if they were getting too close. I would also try and manipulate them. I would also try and take control over one, and that would really just draw a bunch of people on them. And then I would just try and take control of another one, and it would just repeat the process over and over and over again until I took the base, right? And there are combat styles that work out way better. Like, you can use Igni on a bunch of people, especially the more you upgrade it. And it's just, there are so many different play styles. I would say combat is almost as organic as the story. You can do all of this amazing stuff in the combat. You can play your way. Don't play as an alchemist, and don't play as a miscellaneous. Play either magic or physical damage. But there's so many different ways you can play in The Witcher 3 that really, it's up to you as the gamer. If you want to play using spells, you can. If you want to play using swords, you can. But it's all on you. And I loved that aspect of the game. I will say this, though. In games like this, AI can be exploited. You can exploit the AI. You just need to find that sweet spot. Like Bethesda has sweet spots in the game, or in their games, where AI is just broken at some point. If you do something like, I remember I was playing Skyrim, and whenever you're trying to climb the mountain to try and I forgot, it was like one of the first parts of Skyrim, but you come across this bear, and there's no way in hell, if you're playing it on the harder difficulties, that you can actually kill the bear. So what I did was that I stood on a rock and I swung my sword over and over and over and over again until it finally died, right? That's the whole point of Skyrim, right? That, like, Bethesda has AI problems, CD Projekt Red has AI problems, but for the most part, the AI is really, really solid, right? Now, I've talked about the gameplay and the main story. The gameplay and the main story crosses over into the DLC as well. There's really no there's very little variation, I would say, in the actual gameplay, and that's fantastic. The gameplay had a very unique aesthetic to it, and I forgot to mention this, it rewards you for playing great. It rewards you to being good at the game, right? For instance, at a level 3, you can take on enemies that are 4 to 5 levels higher than you if you properly dodge, if you properly use your signs, if you properly attack and defend at certain moments. You can beat enemies that are a significant that have a level advantage on you. It's not impossible, but it is difficult, right? And I absolutely love that system. But the gameplay didn't really change, and that's perfectly fine. There are some things in the game that are different, or that, excuse me, that are in the DLC that are different from the main story, but overall it's the same package that you're dealing with The Witcher 3. And I didn't really talk about how this game affected me. I was playing so many bad games at the time. I was playing, I had just like finished Dying Light like 3 to 4 months ago when The Witcher 3 came out, and I was like, the PS4 is dead. The Xbox One is pretty dead. Like, Sunset Overdrive was great on the Xbox One, but it obviously didn't come to the PS4. Infamous Second Son wasn't very great. And it's like, this is the reason why you would probably buy a PS4 and an Xbox One, but you can get a better running PC for those prices. And I was like, this is the reason why you would get a next-gen console. I think, like, this is the game that makes next generation. And I've never played a story that was so fluid, like water. It was ever changing, and I don't want to be poetic, but that's just how it is. It was, I cannot say anything more positive about The Witcher 3. If you don't already own it, please get it. Please support CD Projekt Red. I really want to see this company succeed. If you have it, but you don't have the DLC, buy the DLC. I'm not aware of the prices right now, but like a couple of months ago, it was that you could buy both the game and the DLC for like $50. Please get the DLC if you have the main game. If you don't if you have both, you're golden, man. I mean, you have so much replay value at that game. You can do you have what, just play the game. It's so fantastic. My next video is going to be about something a little bit different. It's going to be, just saying games that I'm a little bit excited for in the month of September. But for those of you that have been watching and have stuck with me for like 18, 19 minutes right now, and for those of you that may come across and see my video, I hope you comment, favorite, like, and subscribe to my channel. And hopefully you'll ride with me till the wheels come off. I'll ride with you. I'll see you next time.